In this lesson, we're going to keep working on the curves for our line markings. This time, focusing on straight lines. I've grouped the nodes from the previous lesson, which handled our cyclical lane lines. Now, I'll start by adding a join geometry node along with a group input node. We'll take the cross curves and add them to the join so they appear with the rest of the geometry. We'll build the straight line curves in the space below that. This will use a process similar to what we did before with the cyclical lines. We'll offset curves using the duplicate index and road width. But with straight lines, there's one thing we need to change. For cyclical lines, we began from the road shoulder, which made offsetting simple. We just multiplied the index by the lane width. But for straight lines, we start from the center of the road. So, before we begin duplicating and offsetting, we need to push the base curve over to the shoulder first. That way, everything else can follow properly across the road width. To do that, we'll use our offset curve utility node again. We'll base this on the road width. First, get the road width named attribute and multiply it by 0.5 to get the half width. Then subtract the shoulder width from that result. Connect this value to the offset input. This brings the curve near the shoulder. But there's one small problem. The curve is still acting like it's diagonal. That's because the straight curve Boolean is off. Right now, it's applying the square root of 2 to the offset, which is only needed for diagonal lines. Since we're working with a straight path here, turn that off so we get a correct, straight alignment right to the shoulder. That looks better. Now we can move on to the duplication part, just like we did for cyclical lines. Select the duplicate elements node, the multiply node, and the offset curve node from before. Then Shift D to copy them. Move them to a new position in the graph, outside the previous frame group. Hook up the connections again, and we're almost there. Now we need to fix a few things. First, make sure this new offset use straight curves too. Then notice the big space in the middle. These central lines are too wide. We don't want the straight lines to run all the way through the road. They should stop before reaching junctions, so we have room for things like crosswalks and traffic lights. We also already have shoulder lines from our cyclical curves, so we don't need to duplicate them again here. To trim the curves, we'll use a node called trim curve. This node lets you cut curves, either by percentage or by a specific length. Drop this node over the line curves and test it out. Adjusting the start and end sliders shows how the curve gets cut. You can trim by a factor percentage or a set length. But using a percentage doesn't work well here. If you make the road longer, the trim happens too early. That's not what we want. We need to use the length option instead, so the trimmed part always stays the same, no matter how long the road is. To set that trim length, use the spline length node. It gives you the total length of each curve. Then subtract a fixed number, let's say 10, from the spline length, and connect that to the trim node. Now, no matter how long the road is, the line will stop at the correct place. You can set this value manually or make it procedural. I'll use 15 for now. But actually, using the road width might give a better result, because wider roads should have longer markings before they stop. So let's replace the fixed value with the road width named attribute instead. Plug that into the length input. Now the trimming adjusts depending on how wide the road is. When you add more lanes and the road gets wider, the trim zone also grows. This keeps the markings looking balanced. Finally, let's clean things up. Use Ctrl-H to hide all the unused node settings. Select all the new nodes we've made, then press Ctrl-J to group them in a frame. Name the frame Straight Lines. Make the label bigger so it's easy to read. That's it for this part. In the next lesson, we'll take all these curve lines and start turning them into mesh objects. We'll also begin adding materials so the lines look better in our render.